Hey everyone, Nick Yuskevich back with Daily Fantasy Winners, bringing you the British Open edition for this episode of Tee to Green. And it's just going to be one episode here for the British Open. We're not splitting this up. It's just going to be one longer video. We're going to touch on the picks. We've got a millionaire maker, obviously, to talk about, and a lot of the content here will be surrounded upon that. We'll touch up on a couple cash things as well, but it's been predominantly the millionaire maker for GPPs standpoint. And yeah, we'll touch on a couple things strategy-wise. I actually do have something I think that's a little bit unique from a strategy standpoint here for this week, and it's a little bit different. And I'm a little surprised it actually showed itself this week in this way, but it'll be interesting. So we'll touch on that. And anyways, let's just get on into this. So British Open. It is at Carnoustie this year. That is in Scotland, east side of Scotland. It's right up against the North Sea, very much exposed to some windy conditions, if you will. It's 7,400 yards long. It will not play that long. As you would, because 7,400 yards sounds like kind of on the longer side. It really isn't that long. It's because right now, if you've been listening to any of like the interviews or reading any articles, things like that, you're not getting much rain at Carnoustie at all. They haven't for the past couple of months. And as a result, the fairways are extremely fast. And in fact, Tiger Woods said recently that the fairways are actually faster than the greens, to give you some idea. And it's not like the greens are insanely slow. Usually British Open greens are not going to be US Open. They just couldn't handle that because the wind would just blow the ball off the green or just be too exposed to it. But yeah, the fairways are extremely fast. So the fairways here, generally speaking, are on the narrower side. There is definitely going to be fescue to deal with. Now, on the flip side of this, because it has been drier and it hasn't rained as much, John Rahm has said recently that because of this, the fescue actually isn't as thick, or can't grow out as much. So it's not as penal if you do hit the ball in the fescue in some of the spots out there. So Rahm actually, and I'll touch on this when we get into the picks here more, but like John Rahm has said, he's actually going to hit driver quite a bit this week, which is a little unusual here for Carnoustie, because Carnoustie, generally speaking, is a little bit more of the, irons, fairway woods off the tee, putting it in the right spots and hitting all different types of shots. Like, length usually is not an advantage here, and I don't think it is going to be an advantage. I want to make that clear, but it does. Because the fescue is not going to be as thick, or it's just missing the fairway, won't be quite as penal as it has been, like it was back in 2007, and maybe it's just some previous British Opens. I do think it leaves a little more room for just the bombers to be aggressive in certain spots, and it could pay off. So again, I'm not saying length is an advantage. I'm just more saying the point that it's the bombers will have an opportunity here and there, I think, to get a little bit of their edge back, if you will, type of a thing. Kind of picking a middle ground there, so to speak. But what I do think will be important here is definitely strokes gained approaching the green. Good ball strikers. And if you look at the odds per dollar here, generally speaking, if you just look at the odds of a sportsbook, or you just look at the odds per dollar of what you're looking at right here, and you look at strokes gained approaching the green, you will see that approaching the green really matters here a lot, and strokes gained around the green is going to matter here some as well. It's definitely, and again, like, there are some times where I think the narrative of the British Open is that, you want European players, you want international players, you want guys that can hit like all these different types of shots, and are used to playing in like British Open type of like courses or link style courses. And sometimes I think that gets overblown depending which course you're playing at. But for Carnoustie, I do think that is going to be important, just in the event that, because this course is right on the water in. Carnoustie's right on the water. They're going up against the North Sea. It's very exposed to windy conditions, and it's it's just the way the golf course ultimately sets up. And that I do think there is, if you do look at the odds per dollar here, it does show that there will be a little bit of an edge toward those guys that are more the international European players or good link style course players. You do see that in the sportsbook odds makers. So it's not just narrative driven. I do think the odds makers are kind of actually agreeing that it does make sense here a little bit. And sometimes the odds makers don't agree with that. Like, you will see it in the odds. This year, it does seem like that the odds makers are leaning more toward the guys that are good link style players. And so I did want to just throw that out there. And so the last time the British Open was here was in 2007. It was actually one of the most exciting majors really of the last 10, 15 years, which is saying something. It's the best chance Sergio Garcia had at winning a major, with the exception obviously that he won the Masters in 2017. Prior to that, this was like his best chance to win a major. He had to lead the vast majority of the tournament, but Padraig Harrington came back on Sunday, ended up tying him, and they went to a playoff, and Harrington ended up holding him off basically, and Padraig Harrington ended up winning that British Open. It was really a really good British Open. There were a lot of other guys, in contention. Like Andres Romero was 6 under, Ernie Els, Richard Green, I guess, was 5 under, and then you had like Stuart Sink, Hunter Mahan, some other guys, Stricker, were right there. So, yeah. So that is pretty much it. So we're looking at strokes gained approaching the green, strokes gained around the green, a little bit more toward the international players and Europeans who are good link style players. And there are some good link style players that are Americans too. I don't want to just make this a pure black and white situation, that it's like international versus USA. Like that's not the case, but it does lean a little bit more that way overall. So. Weather-wise right now of what is to be expected, it's Monday, and look, the British Open especially, it is extremely extremely difficult to predict weather, because a lot of it is based upon wind and how extreme is it, how severe are the winds going to blow at what specific times. It's very difficult to predict over there. So, but I will just say for right now, it is expected the winds are supposed to be relatively calm in the mornings, like 5 to 10 miles an hour, and the afternoon it's supposed to be more like, 12 to 16 miles an hour, which is very average for a British Open. So it does not seem to be too bad, at least as of right now. Now, just factor that in that this could easily change. And B, that doesn't really factor in for like what the wind gusts will do and, picking up like at just random times and, being higher variance. Like the afternoons are going to be tougher than the mornings overall. But as of right now, it does look like it's going to be relatively tame comparison to previous British Opens. Rain wise, the only time it looks like that there is a real chance of rain as of right now, again, is Thursday night and early Friday morning. And I actually think that, and the winds are supposed to be a little bit higher on Friday. And again, this is on Monday as of now, so this is very much subject to change. So as of right now, I would say because the winds are supposed to be the lowest by a little bit Thursday morning, and at least on Friday afternoon, you would be having a little bit of a wetter golf course after rain potentially, that I do think the Thursday morning, Friday afternoon wave could be a slight advantage as of right now. I don't think it's going to be much, just based upon what we're seeing now. But if we get closer and it looks more extreme, then I will make note of it in the forum. So speaking of tee time waves, one thing you might see that's different here is on the DK and FD, I have some things highlighted green and yellow. This is simply by tee time wave. That's all this is. Yellow is guys that are teeing off Thursday morning, Friday afternoon, and the green is guys who are teeing off Thursday afternoon, Friday morning. And it's a little weird, actually, because you usually don't see it quite this lopsided. There's a lot more green than yellow up here. And then as I scroll down here, you will see there is a lot more yellow here in like the 7K range. And then it's a lot more balanced kind of in the 6K range. And so it's just really interesting that it kind of got, for whatever reason, the tee times are a little bit more star heavy Thursday afternoon, Friday morning over there, for this tournament. And so it's just something to keep in mind that if the guys in yellow do have a little bit of an edge, that you're going to end up actually seeing more of like the guys in the 7K range, maybe having that edge as opposed to some of the star players. And so it's just something to keep in mind here as we move forward. But again, I'm not worried about the tee time edge, and all the picks I do right now are not going to be based on tee times at all whatsoever. I'm just throwing this out there as like kind of the FYI that this could change and this could be here, just so you're aware of it. Okay, that is it for, I think, anything. Oh, as far as like, as far as the statistics and the weather goes, history, that's all covered. The last thing I'm going to say, just as we lead on into the picks, I am very much highly recommending a balanced salary method this week. And it's even the case where like, if you're making like 10, 15, 20 GPP lineups or millionaire maker lineups, like, even if you're making more than that, like, I mean, if you're making 150, then it's another story. But like, even if you're making like, a reasonable amount of GPP lineups, I think you could legitimately fade these top four guys and just start with Justin Thomas or John Rahm or Fowler and just go balance salary method and build from like upper 9K through mid 7K. There are a couple reasons why I think this is good. Number one, the odds, not even looking at, I mean, the odds per dollar show why it's the case, but like, if you look at the odds, DJ is 12-1 to win, and then there is just a cluster of people from like 16-1 to like 30-1 or 40-1. It's just like a ton of people. And because of that, and the reason why that is because everybody is playing reasonably well, but nobody's playing like especially well. And, DJ's the favorite just because, strokes gained wise and everything like that. He should be the favorite. And then, DraftKings has a couple people up here, at the 11,000 and the 10K range just because, just to make their salary structure work. That's what they usually do no matter what. But as you can see with the odds per dollar here, it's like Ricky Fowler is actually the second best option in terms of odds per dollar, down at 9,700. You don't get that at majors like ever. You get that at like the John Deere Classic or the Greenbrier or places like that where the fields are really weak and you just only have like a few top options here, so to speak. And you're just comparing up against a couple people. But when you have like a bunch of like the stars obviously in a field, you don't get this usually. You see Stenson here with a 4.86 and everything like that. Like, so the odds per dollar here is really out of whack here in this in the more expensive guys. And so I actually think balanced salary method to get as many of these guys here from like the 9K through like the mid 7K range is going to be the way to go. And so now you might think like, okay, aren't other people going to be doing this like to some extent? And yes, they will. There is some truth to that. At the same time, if you scroll down here, like this is the British Open, it is a very deep field. If I scroll down here, you will see plenty of good options in this upper 6K range that is just so easy to make lineups. You will see like, even if we go all the way down here, like 6,700, you will see Ryan Moore here at 6,700, really good odds per dollar. He's in pretty good form. Emiliano Grillo, Dylan Fratelli, Ryan Fox, Russell Henley, I guess Matthew Southgate. I have to read up a little bit more on him because I haven't quite gotten that far. But yeah, you see like a lot of these guys, like Kyle Stanley, Kisner. All these guys are at 6,900. Like, a lot of the times we see here at the British Open, like even Charlie Hoffman and Gary Woodland, Kevin Na, who just crushed at Greenbrier, they're 7K. You see this a lot of time, like the really good, like American players, or like not really good, like the decent American players who are like borderline Ryder Cup players or like, top 20 American players, if you will, they're down here at like 7K and like, even like lower 7K range, you get some really good options. And so it's just really easy to make lineups. And a lot of people still probably will end up playing DJ because he's DJ and Rose is having a really good year and everything like that. But I just think based upon the odds per dollar, and like you should have a reason to really pay up for some of these guys if they have like a big edge. And like I said, like I think length is not going to be that important here. So it's like why the price difference isn't going to be, or the price difference, it's like, why are you paying that much more, at 11,000 something when I can get somebody nearly honestly just as good in like the 9K range? I don't think there's much difference for the way Carnoustie sets up. And I do think that also at the same time here, like, I do think the guys here in this like mid to upper 7K range and lower 8K range have a way better chance at winning the golf tournament as opposed to the guys in like the upper 6K range where it's like you'll have to use those guys a little bit more when you're using some of these top options. So I'm just using that kind of as a prelude before I get into the specifics of these top guys. So anyways, let's start off. So Dustin Johnson, he's obviously, he's in good form. Like, let's not pretend he's not. He has not played since the U.S. Open, which is a little bit fascinating. And, his putter is running a little bit hot, but like I said, but between that and the fact that, obviously, like I said, length is not going to be the biggest deal here. Hasn't played in over a month. Like Dustin Johnson, really, you want, like, again, like, yes, he should be the most expensive. 11,300 isn't even that expensive to pay for DJ. And I think a lot of people will use him just because he is DJ, like I said. But again, like, I don't think you're getting that big of an edge using DJ over some of these guys that are cheaper than him. And so I would just say, like, yeah, I have nothing like super against him other than the price. But yeah, like I said, I would just go balance salary method because I think you're just going to make better lineups here overall. If you just want to play DJ because he's DJ, go for it. But he's not one of my favorite plays this week. He's definitely not. It's just, again, like I said, the way the course sets up. Rory McIlroy, same thing. You're not getting a length advantage here with Rory. And so when it comes to this golf tournament, so I'm not really that into him. And the other thing I'm going to add here is that Rory McIlroy, so far, I really hate to say this, but I really do think it's true, because I feel like I'm agreeing with like a narrative, but I actually think there's fact to it at this point because we have enough evidence. I'm waiting to see Rory play really well, or like outs, like, you know, like a field, or play just well more consistently in tougher conditions on tougher courses and things like that. And Rory just generally doesn't do that. Usually Rory thrives on bombers courses or easier conditions. That's usually when Rory really thrives, especially. And so it just doesn't line up here that much for me when it comes to Rory and at 11,000. So again, like, all these top guys can win. I'm just saying, as far as like my favorite guys, yeah, Rory ain't part of that list. So Jordan Spieth. So I actually was really surprised he got 10,600 here for his price. I thought actually he would be the guy that would be maybe like upper 9K range for the way his recent performance has been going. I mean, T42 at the Travelers, miscut US Open, miscut at Memorial, T32 at Fort Worth. I mean, Spieth has not been in good form. Now, almost all of this has been for what this season has been for Spieth. Usually this has been because his putter's been running ice cold. Actually, now over the past few weeks, Spieth's ball striking has been bad. It wasn't just that week at the Memorial. It was mediocre to poor at the U.S. Open, and it was bad at the Travelers. And his strokes gained off the tee was, for whatever it's worth, it was bad there as well. And actually, his putter, the last few tournaments, has actually been better and been decent in strokes gained putting. It's actually completely flipped now of what's happened the last few weeks. So yeah, that's actually really fascinating. And this is why I say, like, I always want to see the tee to green game and more informed than the putting, because Spieth, like, obviously, even though his putter was cold, he was still like making cuts, and he was still like putting up at least decent finishes. Now all of a sudden you see his putter start to warm up a little bit, but the ball striking and tee to green game went away, and now he's actually missing cuts, or he's like finishing very mediocrely in like weak fields. And so I don't like where Spieth's tee to green game now is at all of a sudden with a putter that's still, you know, clearly, you know, that's questionable. Yeah, I don't think Spieth's going to be that highly owned, which is a nice thing. But yeah, Spieth's going into links golf, not having good ball striking. No, thank you. That I would say that I'm not that into Spieth this week at all. As far as Justin Rose, this is just purely a thing of the strokes gained putting regression, minus 0.610. His putter still continues to run really hot. I know the tee to green game is still very good for Rose, and Rose will be probably the most popular play above 10K. I will be surprised if he isn't. He's 16 for 16 in made cuts according to DraftKings, and he's got 11 top 10s, and the recent performance is really good. So it's pretty clear there. He hasn't played since the U.S. Open. That's a little bit interesting. Just like DJ, I'm surprised some of these guys have decided to take a whole month off from competition. It's a little interesting. But yeah, the strokes gained putting regression tool with that minus 0.610. I don't like that as much. So again, that's if you want to play Rose and he's super hot, go for it. Like, I'm not super against him, but I again, not one of my favorite plays here for these top guys. So all right, now we're getting into some guys that I do like a little bit more here for this week. Justin Thomas, his strokes gained approaching the green has been awesome. Really, I mean, it's been awesome this year, but it's really been awesome as of late. He is now 7th in strokes gained approaching the green. Actually, I just realized you cannot see that. Slide over here. Oh, that's column's supposed to be frozen. Sorry, give me 1 second. Freeze column. There we go. Okay, so yeah, you can see Justin Thomas here, 7th in strokes gained approaching the green, 51st in a round, and 54th in putting. That's actually about average for him. And I think Justin Thomas has a much better, more well-rounded game than some people give him credit for. And JT has actually historically been really good on courses, even when length isn't like a big deal here. I think Justin Thomas is arguably the most well-rounded golfer in the game right now. And 10K is a great price to pay for JT when you've got some guys around him that will also definitely be used between Rose, Rahm, and Fowler. I don't think his ownership will be too high. I think JT is by far my favorite player of guys that are 10K and above. So, so green light there on JT. Let's move on to Jon Rahm. So yeah, I mentioned Rahm. So Rahm had said that the course is obviously very firm and fast, but the fescue is not nearly as thick. And so Rahm's actually going to play pretty aggressively this week, and he's going to hit a lot of drivers. Rahm is typically, if you ask me who's the best driver of the golf ball in terms of length and accuracy combined, it's a debate between DJ and Rahm, and they're 1A and 1B to me. And so I think for Rahm to do that, it makes a lot of sense. His strokes gained approaching the green is at 120th. Having said that, it has been better here over his last couple of events. His ball striking is starting to come around a little more into form to where we would want to see it. If for Rahm, let me just pull this up here real quick. Recent performances tied for 4th in Dubai and tied for 5 at the French Open, and those are tournaments that don't factor in the strokes gained approaching the green statistics. But his approaching the green, just in general, with like greens and reg and all that type of stuff, it's definitely been trending in the right direction here over the last few weeks. And I will just mention this as well, for whatever reason, if I haven't mentioned it or you haven't heard me say it before, strokes gained approaching the green is the most predictive thing when it comes to the recent performance. Usually when you look at the strokes gained trends and you're looking at it over the course of a year, and you're looking to see like what's just brings more variance week to week and what you just see more that's more predictive over recent form, strokes gained approaching the green is the most predictive thing. Usually comes in chunks of like how well your ball striking has been over a certain stretch, and Rahm's is definitely trending in the right direction. So I think this 120th for strokes gained approaching the green. Crap, I just realized that's off the screen for you guys as well. 120th right here for Jon Rahm here, as you can see. That is misleading. He's doing much better than that. So I think Rahm is a fantastic option. His form is great right now. And I know that, like I said, length isn't going to be a big deal here, but the fact that he's going to play aggressively, and Rahm really is one of the best drivers of the golf ball, length and accuracy-wise, I actually kind of like that for him specifically, and just only paying $9,800 as opposed to like 10,000 something, more in like the Speith range or something like that. So count me in for Jon Rahm. Ricky Fowler, extremely good odds per dollar. Really good form. He's going to be owned. I still don't think it's going to be something insane just because there are enough good options around him. I really just wouldn't worry about ownership overall too much here. Unless it's somebody you really dislike, then maybe you could have more reason to fade him or something. But again, Fowler's going to be like 25% probably would be my guess. But still, that's fine by me. His strokes gained putting regression is positively a little bit. Fowler has generally played well. Fowler thrives especially on the strokes gained approach in the green courses, and he's actually been pretty good on links golf historically, and he's been pretty good in the European tournaments he has played in. He is in pretty good form overall. There's nothing really I don't like about Ricky Fowler other than the fact that, he will be kind of on the higher owned side. He's going to be like 25% owned. I'll be surprised if it's higher than that. That's perfectly fine with me. I would play Fowler. Go ahead. Tommy Fleetwood, definitely in on Tommy Fleetwood. Strokes gained approaching the green for him, I believe, has been better, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, it has been much better here over the last few tournaments for him as well, despite the fact that he missed the cut in his last event at the French Open, but that doesn't concern me enough to make me go against him. Fleetwood's ownership will be a little bit lower, probably just because he is near Fowler and Rahm and JT, but again, I think Fleetwood's a perfect candidate for Carnoustie. Brooks Koepka. So Koepka, again, I've said this before, I'll say it again. People think of Koepka still as like the bomber upside guy. Koepka has a really good short game. He does. I don't know. I still feel like that gets overlooked a lot of the time. As you can see here, his putter actually this year isn't even running particularly hot because Koepka, as you see, is traditionally a very good putter, and he's actually expected to even be a little bit better, which is obviously a great thing to see. And so I'm definitely in on Koepka. So as you see, I'm all in on this balanced salary method. Sergio does not have enough events for the qualify for the stroke gain statistics, I guess, which doesn't seem right to me for some reason. But I checked and he's not qualifying for it for whatever reason. Don't ask me why. But in any case, if you do take a look at Sergio's recent performance after what's been kind of an abysmal year for him, and he had missed like 4 out of 5 cuts in a row, I believe, after the leading up through the U.S. Open. His last 2 tournaments on the European Tour in the BMW International and the French Open, tied for 12th and tied for 8th. Sergio's tee to green game, his ball striking, coming around a little bit finally here since he's gone back over playing on the European side of things. And so this $9K price and having the worst odds per dollar, yeah, it's like you would think this is a pretty bad price for Sergio, and maybe it is a little bit. But given that the ball striking is turning and he's going to be low owned, I think he's a pretty good option actually for GPPs in the Millionaire Maker. You won't have to own him that much to over own him. Perfectly fine with that. Tiger Woods. I think he's going to be pretty highly owned. I just think he's always going to be highly owned as long as he's healthy and just keeps showing signs of being great while still being pretty inconsistent, certainly at times. I think Tiger is going to be highly owned. I will say this, that the good thing here, if you are wanting to play Tiger, is this course pretty much brings the opportunity of taking driver out of his hand, which is probably a positive thing in terms of Tiger, playing more like, stingers, long irons, fairway woods, whatever it's going to be off the tee, which is probably going to be beneficial for him. And Tiger's strength so far this year, as you can see, as I scroll over, you will see with Tiger, he is 3rd in strokes gained approaching the green, and he is 4th in strokes gained around the green. And those are the 2 things I said that are going to be important here. So this is actually not a bad time to play Tiger. I'm just not going to do it because, or recommend it completely as far as a quote-unquote pick or being one of my favorite guys, just because... Just take it for what it's worth. I'll believe it when I see it. When he puts it, when he puts it all together, I'll believe it when I see it. I've been kind of playing against Tiger all year just because his ownerships have been very high, and they're just, I don't know. It's just one of those things where I just don't think the price and the ownership for Tiger, I'm not going to do it. I don't think it's like an unreasonable price for Tiger because he has shown flashes. I'm just not personally going to recommend doing it, but I will say this, I might be biased a little bit, and I will admit, I actually have a bet on Tiger to not win a major this year, and I'm not interested in trying to recommend or play like a hedge against that or something like that. So there could be a little bit of bias kicking in here with that. So I will just, if being completely objective, from a statistical standpoint, approaching around the green, this sets up nicely for Tiger. I'm just not going to do it. I'll believe it when I see it, and the ownership, it just won't excite me that he'll be 25+% owned. Not for Tiger. I'm just not going to do it. So, take what you want from that. Jason Day, you know what I'm going to say about Jason Day. 8,800, yes, all day I will recommend that for Jason Day. His putter is actually, it's down to a minus .660, which is much lower than what it was obviously earlier in the year. So we do see that falling back. As far as Jason Day's approach game, it has been getting better. It was better at the U.S. Open, and it was much better at the, or not the U.S., I'm sorry, it was much better at the Travelers. That's a really good sign, and Jason Day actually has been also really good at playing courses that are not necessarily suited to bombers, because he's really good at playing off the tee with his 2-iron or fairway woods. Day's usually really good at that. And so you combine that with an improved ball striking. Jason Day's usually been pretty, obviously his consistency at majors, despite what just happened for him at the US Open, putting that aside, his consistency at majors historically is still very good. And so, and his upside's great at 8,800. Ownership probably won't be too high for Day, just because people have been kind of anti-Day recently. I think you're going to get a nice opportunity for Day in GPPs. Let's move on to Paul Casey. Love Paul Casey, everything top to bottom. The putter, all of a sudden running a little on the hot side now, actually, for Paul Casey, just by comparison to what he usually does being average. But again, minus .290, that's not like that hot. I'm not like that worried about it. Strokes gained approach, he is 6th. That's awesome. This is a Paul Casey tournament, no doubt about it. I find it interesting that Casey is 8,700 and Tommy Fleetwood's 9,400. I'm not sure how that happened, because I thought that they would at least be more comparable at every tournament for the time being. But for some reason, Casey's cheaper. So I actually think you're getting a nice price for Casey at 8,700. 7,700 based upon where kind of everybody else is. And this odds per dollar at 3.82, I think should be a little bit better. Or excuse me, 3.36 should be a lot better. Like if Casey versus Tiger heads up in this tournament, I'm taking Casey heads up. I'll just put it that way to give you an idea. So yeah, Francesco Molinari. The standard every single week. Recommend him. Strokes gained putting regression still on the positive side for him. The only thing I don't like is the fact that he played at the John Deere last week, and he got on the charter Sunday night to take the red eye over to Carnoustie to land there on Monday, and so that's not my it's not my favorite thing to have that short travel. But I will say this: if there is somebody that's well equipped to handle that, it is Francesco Molinari. He has a ton of experience bouncing back and forth between European and American events, and he's not the type of European player who's always been like, I'm going to play almost all my events on the European tour, but then only play in the majors on the US side. He's been doing this for a while where he actually just goes back and forth between both tours a ton. So Molinari has a bunch of experience doing this, and looking back on him historically, usually the travel doesn't affect him as much as like the average person or most people. So I guess it's not that concerning, but it is worth bringing up. Since Molinari is 8,600, I don't think his ownership will be too bad. Obviously he's in amazing form and he will get played, but I just think the price is high enough that I don't think he'll get too much play. Hideki, 8,500. All of a sudden, last three events for Hideki, tied for 16th at the U.S. Open, tied for 13th at the Memorial, tied for 16th at the Byron Nelson, and believe it or not, Hideki, strokes gained approaching the green, way better at the U.S. Open, and even though he didn't, at the Memorial where he finished tied for 13th, his strokes gained approaching the green was like one of the best in the entire field. So Hideki's approach game all of a sudden, tee to green, coming around very nicely, kind of like Jon Rahm's is, although Hideki obviously wasn't as strong, it hasn't been as strong as Rahm in other areas, like, don't get me wrong, but just from an approaching the green standpoint, Hideki is quietly heating up like Rahm is. And so Hideki, who we know is a very talented golfer, we know when things are normally in line for him, he is a 10K golfer or at least like mid 9K range in major championships. I think you're getting a nice price for Hideki, and again, like you're seeing this odds per dollar at 2.93, ownership probably won't be too bad. So I think you're getting a nice spot again for Hideki and GPPs. Patrick Reed, the name of his game is strokes gained approaching the green and strokes gained around the green. Like this is a very much a Patrick Reed setup. His strokes gained approaching the green has been on fire here since the Masters. I mean, he hasn't let up in the approach game at all. So I am in on Patrick Reed here. Putting regression, nothing. He's positive 0.120. 33rd in approaching the green, 3rd in around the green. I'm very much in on Patrick Reed for this week. This is just nonstop. I know it's like I'm recommending everybody in this range, but I just love the way it sets up just to go full on balanced salary method. I will have a couple fades in here, I promise, before we wrap up. One of those guys might be Alex Noren, believe it or not, and it is because of this minus 0.540. Now, again, for Alex Noren, we don't have the data on him putting-wise because this is the first year he's really been playing on the PGA Tour. And so that is the one thing that this minus 0.540 might be misleading. Maybe it's more like a minus 0.2 or something like that where it's not as bad. But his tee to green game is very strong right now. He is 38th off the tee and 14th in approach. So, and his form is really good. He will probably get some ownership, but Noren, at the same time, it's like there are signs pointing here that Noren should be decently owned because, the odds per dollar is really good and everything like that. But Noren, at the same time, has yet to be really highly owned in a major. So, and he's not still like a household name that I don't think it's going to be extremely high. And because he's right next to Henrik Stenson with the insane odds per dollar, and that's the dumbest price. I like that's 8,200 for Stenson in this tournament is actually worse than when he was 7,700 at the Masters. Like I don't get what DraftKings was doing. But anyway, so yeah, because I'm not like super concerned about ownership, and I think this strokes gained putting regression is misleading. I think Noren is a perfectly fine play, and I wouldn't worry about it too much. He's not my top play, but I do like him, so nothing against him there. Henrik Stenson. So, I mean, this ownership guess is really fascinating. So Stenson fits this course extremely well. He is number 1 in strokes gained approaching the green. He is 160th in strokes gained around the green, which is a little interesting. But Stenson is obviously usually a pretty good Open Championship player. Recent performance, tied for 6th at the U.S. Open, tied for 26th at the St. Jude, tied for 13th at the Memorial, tied for 23rd at the Players, and then a 5th at the Masters, 6th in Houston, blah, blah, blah. So, like, Stenson's been consistently at least really good. His odds per dollar is insane. He crushed at the Open Championship just a couple of years ago. His price is absurd, just like everything. So, like, this is a similar situation to the Masters, and in my opinion, it's worse. So, yeah, again, like, this is just do what you want with it. If you really fully believe that you should be playing the ownership game, and you just, like, if anybody's going to be over 25% owned that you just don't want to pay for him regardless who it is, then you should be fading Stenson. That's fine, and I don't blame you for going that route. I will also say, though, that Stenson at 8,200, like, if you ask me, like, Stenson should honestly be, like, top 10 at this tournament as far as price goes. Like, Stenson should, at the very minimum, should be lower 9K, and he probably should be upper 9K. And this is an absurd price. And if Stenson is, like, under 30% owned, I think it's perfectly fine to play him, and I wouldn't blame you at all whatsoever. So I will just say this. I don't have a strong thing like you should definitely fade him, or you should definitely just go all in on him. I'm just saying it's a totally a thing you should be asking yourself. Do you believe that paying only paying 8,200 for the roughly 25-30% owned of Stenson is going to be worth it? That's just your call. At the end of the day, I do think it's perfectly fine to just go ahead and play him at the field 25-30%. I don't know if I'd want to play him at 50% and try to over own him a ton. I think that's a little crazy. If you want to go 35-40, maybe. I think if you're trying to go 50 or just play him like through the roof, then I think you're kind of getting crazy. I think you're getting a little bit crazy there because anybody could really realistically miss the cut. But if you're somebody that really loves to play the ownership game hardcore and you don't like anybody that's over 25% owned, then fade him, and I don't blame you at all for that. So Phil Mickelson, 8,100, and his odds per dollar stinks. That's really interesting. That's something you definitely normally do not see with Phil Mickelson. But 65th at the Greenbrier. He just missed the cut just this past week at the Scottish, and he's mediocre at the U.S. Open with a tie for 48th. Here's the deal, though, for Phil. His strokes gained putting, minus 0.69, and his approach game is actually slowly starting to get worse here over the last few tournaments, and I don't like that. And his strokes gained around the green is 85th right now, and even his short game's been a little bit shaky lately. So I actually, it's more not so... Because of the price and the odds per dollar, I'm just like, okay, yeah, Phil actually should be reasonable here. But because of his recent form and because the ball striking's kind of going away, I just don't really see a huge point in playing Phil. And there's a bunch of other guys around him I'd rather play. So Phil's not one of my favorite plays. It's really amazing just like how I really try not to be biased on this, but like for whatever reason, I seem to be anti-Tiger and anti-Phil. Probably more biased with the Tiger thing and the ownership standpoint, but Phil just has never been lining up for me for like the most part this year in recommending him for whatever reason. I swear I'm not biased against it because I've recommended him plenty of other times in other years, but for whatever reason, it's not showing up here yet. And this putting regression number is probably a big enough reason why. Lastly, Marc Leishman. I'm neutral on Marc Leishman. This tournament sets up that it should be great for Marc Leishman because it's not a bomber's course. Leishman's game really fits all courses. His approach and around the green numbers are actually decent, but his recent performance has just been meh, and his ball striking recently has just been eh. So, yeah, 8K, good price, totally fine, but recent performance-wise is not like the greatest thing in the world. So it's like, yeah, I'm fine with you playing him. I don't think he'll be super highly owned despite this odds per dollar because the recent performance hasn't been like amazing, and there's enough good players around him. But it's just like, yeah, I think he's good. He's not great. I'll leave it that with Leishman. So. I'm sorry. All right, so that's it. I know that was a bunch of rambling about me just liking everybody between like 10K and 8K. I understand that. And I was just trying to give a little bit of insight on kind of like what I like about each guy just real quick. But that's just the way I think it sets up. 75, kind of around that 7,500 mark here up through 10K, I think is a really nice spot to load up on your lineups because I think while there will be some other people doing that, I don't think it's going to be so extreme because you, like I said, said, you're going to have some really easy options at the lower 7K and upper 6K range to go with some of these top options that enough people will still do it, like using DJ and using Rose especially, that I think it's easy to over-own a lot of the guys in the mid-tier. And ultimately, these guys in the 10K through mid-7K range, they have a way better chance of winning the golf tournament, which is what's important for the Millionaire Maker and winning your GPPs as opposed to the guys that are like in the upper 6K range, lower 7K range. Very last thing, just because I said I'd touch up on cash real quick, just a couple of my favorite cash options for this week. I do think Ricky Fowler and Henrik Stenson are near locks, and it's partially odds per dollar, yes, but it's also because of how they line up and fit for this tournament. I think those are your two best options for building your cash lineups around. And then from there, as far as like where you want to go, I think it's, again, you're going to be looking at odds per dollar, and you're going to be nitpicking a little bit using the strokes gained putting regression on who you want to go with, whether it's going to be Paul Casey would certainly be a fine option, even though his odds per dollar isn't like the greatest, or like a Francesco Molinari. Maybe you want to go down here, obviously, into the upper 7K range with a guy like Ian Poulter. I will certainly be recommending Poulter in the forum when we get there. So those would be kind of like the few cash options I would start by recommending in terms of making your lineups. Okay, that is it. Best of luck with your lineups. Hopefully this helped. We'll see you in the forum. I'm at Nick Yuskevich on Twitter, Daily Fantasy Winners on Twitter, at DFantasyWinners, and thanks again for all the support with the YouTube channel. All right, good luck, everybody.